In this next series of videos, we're going to be taking a look at how we can use ZBrush, some of the tools within inside of ZBrush to do this hard surface modeling. So you can see here the example that I've got is a creature that I've been modeling on, and I wanted to add some of this hard surface gear. We'll be looking at the different techniques that were used to get us here to get this final design. Alright, before we really get into the hard surface modeling inside of ZBrush, it's important for you to understand that in order for us to work efficiently, we're going to have to know where a lot of different tools are inside of ZBrush. So you can see I've got this custom interface that I made here. And it's got all my different brushes and a lot of these different tools that I'm using for the hard surface workflow. And I've got some things over here in this area too. So if you're a little bit confused on how to make this custom interface, there is a earlier video in this series. It's number 3 video I think on this, and it's creating a custom interface and setting up hotkeys. So again, I'm going to be calling out where certain things are in the interface, but I'm going to be showing that I drug those off of certain areas where the tool sits, and it's going to be here on the interface. And then it's kind of up to you to make sure that you understand where these things are at, because I really only want to show it one time and then start working with this interface that we got here. How can we start adding a lot of kind of model detail to something that was already pretty complex before? Because you can see I spent a lot of time on the organic kind of hard surface mixture for the body, and then adding all these pieces. If I go to the top subtool for this, and if I just hover my cursor over this, I think I'm at total polys. We've got at least over 11 million polys for this thing here. So basically, to get to this stage, I had to sculpt everything for the body. And let me just hide everything except for the body. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and click on this eye icon. That's going to hide everything except for the body part. So I got this to a nice point, and these were multiple objects. I had to merge all these things together and then use the Decimation Master tool to get this final version that you see here, which is not super high res, but it is enough detail to go and have a really nice look for something, and then I can keep building on the top of this. So I was treating this as if this is a stage, and I'm complete with that stage, save that off all my working files, and then build this proxy version that's been decimated with Decimation Master. That was shown in an earlier video, how to do that process. And then from there, you're able to start working with the hard surface stuff on top of that. Okay, so that's how all these different pieces and subtools were actually added to that proxy shape here. So I'm just going to leave this one on here, and we're going to look at adding a just a model to this geo and start slicing it up and start using some of the nice tools that they have inside of here to get nice crisp edges on things. Okay, so I'm going to go into the subtool section and I'm going to append a sphere. That's what I'm aiming for here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit append, and I'm looking for a polysphere. If you don't see it here, it's pretty easy. We can hit the comma key, and they've got under tools, there's a bunch of different models that you can load up, and you could load up this polysphere. You could just double click on it like that, and that will load it into the scene. That actually puts it in this trough of different models that you're kind of pulling from. So it switched us off of our current model that we had, and it threw it in here. So I'm going to go back to our model, and now I can append that thing, and I can find it. So I'll hit append, and here's our polysphere that I just added. It's going to put it at the bottom of the stack, so if you only have one object, it's going to put it right under here, but if you got a bunch of objects, it's going to put it down here. And because I hit shift and hit all the eye icons for everything, I'm hiding them. I can't see anything else other than the sphere whenever I select it, so I can go back to the top and turn on the visibility of this here. And then now here's my sphere. So the sphere is actually sitting inside the torso of this. We can turn on this transparency button, and we can see inside of a model at that point. And I'm going to put on the transpose tool, and I'm just going to click and drag out an action line like this, and then I'm going to click and drag in the middle, and I'm going to get this sphere on top of here. I'm going to build something as if we are building like a helmet for this thing. So again, I'm going to click and drag out a new action line, and then I'm going to put it on scale, and then I'm going to drag up here like this. Now I do think let me undo this real quick. If I tap X and make sure I have symmetry on, whenever I drag this thing out, it's going to scale it from the middle, which is what I want. I want this thing to be nice and symmetrical, like that. And I can move this, put on the move, middle mouse, like this. And the other kind of cool thing about the move is if we click and drag out, if we take this end point right here and click and drag, we can actually deform the model a bit on that. So now I can move with this middle one here, like that. And just something else about the move, which is kind of interesting. If you you've got this little point here, you can click and drag on this, and that actually rotates your canvas for you, which might be something that comes in handy when you're trying to hit a certain angle. But if you come to the back here and click and drag out, you actually flatten the model to that point, which can be helpful for making sure you're hitting some certain shapes for the hard surface stuff. So I'm just going to click and drag this back here. I think that's pretty good for what I want to do here. Now if I go to the top, I can see I want to take this thing and pull it in just a little bit. I'm going to turn on my polyframe so I can see what's going on with the geometry here. So I'll turn it off this transparent like that. And so here's the shape that I'm kind of working with. And I did kind of cross the middle a little bit. I don't care about subdivision levels, so I'll go ahead and turn this into Dynamesh and convert the geo over to something that's topology independent. So I'm going to go to geometry, and I'm going to go to Dynamesh and turn off this blur. I'll have projection turned off. Let's do a resolution of like 256 and just see what that gets. And it's going to ask if I want to freeze subdivision levels. No, don't want to. And so that's pretty good. Not too bad. You can see we've got some of this geo kind of going on here, and let's introduce for the first time some of the polishing features that they have that we're going to be using a lot for this hard surface stuff. So if we click and drag down to our deformation tab, there's this polish by features, and if we click and drag out, it doesn't polish that much with this little donut hole thing enabled here. That tries to preserve the shape as much as possible when it smooths. So if you want to have a big effect over smoothing, take that little thing off and then now do polish by feature like this. Okay, so you can see how it's smoothed out that crack here. So when we start adding polygroups to this thing, you'll see how this this tool actually does a really nice job of smoothing out any kind of errors in the model and then holding really nice hard edges for us. So this is one of those things where this is going to be down here on the interface. So you're going to have to go to Preferences, Enableize, Customize for your interface. Again, there's a video for this entire process. And then just hold down Control and Alt, and you're going to drag this down here. I've got this sitting here for Polish by Feature. You can see I also am using the Polish right here. And then I'm also using Inflate. That's something else that we'll use quite a bit. So Inflate sits here. And then the other thing that we're going to do is, if I turn on the polyframe, we're going to do this quite a bit where we want the model to be nice and symmetrical. So if I tap X and just move this thing slightly, I'll just put on my move brush. I've got a hotkey for that, and it's set to 4 for me, which you can see I've got my move brush down here for that custom interface. If I just move this thing out like this, and I like the shape of this thing on this side, and I want to mirror it across, we can go ahead and do that with, under Geometry, we can go Modify Topology, and then we can say Mirror and Weld along X. And you can see I've taken that, and I've dragged this down here as well. So there's this button, because we're gonna use that quite a bit to mirror things across and making sure we're being symmetrical on both sides. Because some of these tools that they have inside of ZBrush for slicing and cutting, they don't work with dual brushes with symmetry on. So you have to build it on one side and then just hit this mirror and weld button. So what if I've got a change over on this side that I want to keep? So let's say I've got something like this, and I'll pull this out a little bit more and just change the shape so it's pretty apparent kind of what's going on here. Maybe flatten this a little bit more like this. And let's say this is something I want to keep. If I do the mirror and weld, it gets rid of it because it's on the wrong side for mirroring across. I'm going to use the mirror that actually exists in the deformation tab. So you can flip-flop your models. Under deformation there's a mirror, so you can see how I can just flip-flop the model. So here's another part where I held down Control and Alt and built up this custom interface and put it here because I'm using these things quite a bit. So I want it to keep these changes on this side, just hit mirror, and then now I can do mirror and weld, and now I've got something that's very close to being the same thing on the other side. And I'll just start polishing that up a little bit better, and you can see you might have to drag it quite a few times. Let's just do something like this. I'll do mirror and weld and maybe polish a few more times. So that's giving me something decent for my first beginning of the shapes on this thing. I might want to tweak it just a little bit, and I'll put on symmetry, tap X, because now I know I have symmetry. I'm starting to like the shape a little bit, and we'll kind of fix this up just a little bit here. So the other thing we're going to start looking at is taking the slice curve brush, which you can see down here in my custom interface, for actually slicing through the model. That actually exists up here. If you hold down Control and Shift, you can see if you click in this area, it's going to give you a whole new set of brushes up here. There's trim curves and all kinds of stuff. We're going to look at this slice curve. So we'll go ahead and put that on there. And basically if I hold down Control and Shift with this brush enabled, I get a line. And if I hold on space, the spacebar modifier, I can reposition this thing. If I tap Alt once, it's going to give me a point for curvature. If I tap Alt again, it's going to give me another point, like that. So I'll just drag across here, and you can see if we didn't have polyframe turned on, we wouldn't even know anything actually even happened. But with polyframe turned on, we can see that it actually slices through the model, and it actually gives us a poly group on this side and this side, so it's doing separation of the model. So let's look at this again. Control and Shift, we'll drag out a line, and I'll tap Alt, and that'll give me curvature. If I want a nice straight point or corner, tap Alt twice real quickly. So double tap, and then you can see here's the line that it's going to give me. Now if I tap Alt again, it's going to give me a nice kind of curve right here like this. So here's some of the shapes that it's starting to generate, like this. Now I can go and hold down Control and Shift, and I'll drag something out of here like this. And I want to think about maybe like, you know, helmet design, if this is going to be a visor or something like that. So we can go back and turn on this transparent, and we can see here's the face underneath of this. So maybe I want my windshield or the visor to be like right back and through here, like that. Okay, so you can see what this has done. It's split all the way through this, obviously because we drug a line all the way through. It is possible to just start in the middle of something like this. It doesn't always work out so great, but when it does, it's really cool. Because we started in the middle of this, it doesn't actually slice through that part, and it gives us this here. The other thing we can do is, if that's just not working for you for whatever reason, just slice all the way through the model like what we just looked at. I'll do something like this right here, and then now we need to use our select rectangle to isolate just this piece and this piece together, so we can build up the polygroup information that we're looking for. So let me show you what that's all about. So again, this exists up here. Control Shift, and you click in here, and you can get the select rectangle. So this is why I'm building up all these two different selection types for selection rectangle and the lasso. And here's the slice curve, slice circle that you see up here, and rectangle. That's why I'm throwing all these down here, because otherwise you have to keep doing a bunch of button presses to get to that tool, and you just want to be able to quickly switch on and off these different things. So I'm gonna, with this select rectangle enabled, I'm gonna hold down Control Shift, click on this poly group, click it again, and then click away. So you can see, click it once, it isolates it all by itself. If you click it again, it gives you the inverse of that, and then I want to take away from this total selection because I want to get these two pieces together. Control Shift, click, like that. Now if I want the inverse of what I'm looking at, hold on Control Shift and drag a marquee in the open viewport, and it gives you the inverse of that. Now that these two polygroups are together, I can just hit Control W, and that's the hotkey for building a polygroup for whatever is visible. And if I want to bring everything back, Control Shift, just click in the open viewport like that. So again, Control Shift, you click on here, that's going to give you this polygroup. Click it again, it gives you kind of the inverse of that, and you can start taking away pieces. Hold on Control Shift, drag in the viewport, and that's going to give you the inverse of whatever you're looking at that's visible. And then if you hit Control W, it's going to do a polygroup for whatever you see is visible. I'm going to hit undo for that because I actually want to keep this, and these things separate at that point. Okay, so we did all that just to basically get us to the point where I'm going to turn off this transparent, to where we can start using this polish by feature. So again, remember, if this thing has that little donut hole thing enabled, it's going to try to preserve the shape as much as possible, and then polish. So if we turn this off, it's really hard to even see what kind of changes there are, just because it's kind of straightening out the geo. But if we turn this off, this is going to have a big effect on what's going on shape-wise. So you can see ZBrush with these polygroups, if you have two groups that just kind of come together, it'll do a nice job of kind of smoothing between it. But if you got three areas that come together, it holds that point that you see here. So I'm going to keep doing this polish by feature and keep cranking it quite a bit. Now here's the interesting thing with let me find it here. Dynamesh, we have this ability to reduce the geometry, the amount of geometry that we're working with. So this is somewhat dense. It's not that dense, but let's just drop this thing down to like 190 for our Dynamesh. Now hold down Control and drag in the open viewport, and you can see how it remeshes. It keeps all the polygroup information, but it really tore up our edges that we had quite a bit. So here's where this will become a little bit more apparent. So if I do the polish by feature and we have that donut hole thing enabled, it'll do this nice and kind of tighten things up. But if we put that in there, it'll really try to preserve the shape, and you can see it's only really kind of working on straightening out those edges. So depending on what you're trying to do, if you're really happy with kind of the shape that you have and you don't want to do this big giant change to the shape, you want to have this thing enabled here. But if you really want to smooth it out, use this guy. And the stage that I'm at right now, I really want to have ZBrush kind of pull on these shapes quite a bit to start getting this really kind of mechanical, super hard edge kind of thing. So I'm going to keep pulling on that. And you can see the more that you do that, you can see what's going on with the curvature. It kind of curves and then it dips up into this point here. So just watch as you continue on with this how much it affects the surface. The other thing is why I put this polish on here. I've got the open option on this, and that, remember, that was over in deformation. If we polish like this, we can get a look that's kind of like this right here. So it kind of rounds the corners a little bit. And then if we do this polish by feature and just do it ever so slightly, we can start to get that shape. But if that's killing too much of that look for you, we'll just do this one here with that option enabled, and you can see how it is trying to preserve some of that look, but it really is kind of straightening out that edges a little bit more. And then at this point, we'll take this off here and just do a real slight polish on it. So you can see, depending on like what you're trying to get look-wise, you're going to have to kind of experiment a little bit with that. I'm going to turn on transparent, and you can see with all this pulling on the surface, my chin is starting to stick out of this model here. So I'm just going to tap 4 and pull this down a little bit and through here and move this up. keep tweaking on this thing until I'm happy with the shape that we have. So I'm going to push this up a little bit here and maybe come to the front and pull this in a bit. Right here like that. To me it's getting, I don't know, I think it's producing a cooler look. And you can see I'm like not super concerned about the exact shape that it is, because I'm going to be polishing this thing quite a bit when we're done with it. So I'll turn off the transparency, and so here's that shape, and then now I'll do this polish. I'll polish it up quite a bit like that. So here's the other thing with this slice, this workflow. We could hold on Control and Shift, because we've got on the select rectangle, and I'm just going to isolate just this part like what we talked about, and then I'll do the slice curve, and then now I will just hold on Control and Shift and try to follow this thing, just tapping Alt. So I'm just trying to build some different shapes that will give us some design possibilities. Like that. And let me do this. I don't think I'm going to follow this line kind of right in through here like that. So again, here we are in the situation where we've got a bunch of different poly groups together. So it is possible, without switching to the select rectangle, you can hold on Control Shift while you have the slice tool on, and you can subtract certain things away. So I'm going to select my slice curve tool, and you can see if you hold on Control Shift, it kind of works just like you got for the select rectangle, but you just need to click on an area and it should subtract it away. And I'm not a big fan of using this in this way, just because it can be a little bit tricky at times and it maybe wants to slice through the geo, but it might get you to the point where you can isolate these two pieces like you got here and just hit Control W, and then now you got a new poly group. So if I hold on Control and Shift and I do my normal just click once in the open viewport, it is going to bring everything back like what I'm looking for. So that that's kind of cool. I'm going to take that slice tool and I'm going to do another slice coming right down through here like this for the neck part, like that. So this is how you isolate. You can hit the solo button. I added a hotkey for this, Alt S, because I'm using it so much. So the other thing I need to kind of let you guys know about is actually using this polish by feature in only a particular area. So if I get that select rectangle again and I isolate just this piece, if I hold on Control and click on the open viewport, it masks whatever's visible like that. Now if I hold on Control Shift, bring everything back by clicking here, I can get the inverse of this. So I could use the polish by feature right here like that, and it's going to polish this area, which is fine. But if I turn off the polyframe and if I hit Control H to hide my mask, you can see how it makes this thing, it starts to tear up the edge quite a bit on that. So I will hit Control H to bring back my mask so we can see it. Now, if you hold down Control and click on a piece of a mask that's already masked, it will blur that edge for the mask. So we're kind of exposing more of this area for the polish by feature to work. So we do that, and you can see now if I take that polyframe off and hit Control H to hide, it's smoothing this thing out, but it's only grabbing so much of the area. It's kind of doing this weird, you can start to see a little bit of odd shading through here. So it's just something you got to be a little bit concerned about. I'm going to hit undo till I get my mask back to where it was at. and here we are here. So I'm just going to tap that one time like that, and then use the polish by feature. Okay, and I'll hit Control H just to take a look at what we've got going on here. Okay, so that's one thing we could do. If I want to get just like this area isolated, I'll follow that same those same steps like that, and then polish by feature. Hit Control H, and you can see it's starting to smooth that thing out pretty nice. So that's a way that you can start to polish particular areas and make sure that you're only affecting maybe a particular spot on your model that you want to smooth out. So the other thing we can do is if we put it on this transpose tool, if you hold on Control and you click, it recognizes polygroup information. So it's going to mask everything off except for that that polygroup that we had. And again, that's just holding down Control and you click on an area like this, and it recognizes that polygroup. I'm holding down Control and getting rid of the mask. Let me undo that real quick. I'm getting rid of the mask and then holding down Control and adding a new area. It might have issues if you've already got that isolated like that. It thinks you want to smooth that mask out. So that's why I'm clearing the mask and then holding down Control and clicking on a new section. So really what I want to do is get this isolated right here like this. And we looked at that flattening ability of the move transpose section. So I'm just going to get off to the side here. And sometimes if I want to be really accurate about stuff, I'd turn off perspective. Like if I've got this side view, you just rotate your canvas a little bit and hold down Shift when you get close to like having a side view, and it snaps that vantage point for you. So now I'm going to take this thing and then use that flattening ability that we looked at. Remember, to flatten, you use the dot away from this white one. That one rotates your camera view. We could do that. And I'll just push this thing maybe at about right here or so. Okay. And then I'm going to smooth this mask one time and then hit the polish by feature like that. And now you can see the type of effect that that is actually having on that surface. So you may not want this kind of lip thing. You're just going to have to kind of pay attention to how this thing is actually smoothing things out and use it to your advantage in particular areas. So the other thing is, like if I isolate just that section and do the polish by feature, it's going to really change that that look. But maybe I thought this lip was kind of cool. That's where we can kind of come back in with this slice curve tool, and I'm just going to get this positioned kind of nicely. Turn on polyframe again, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. So I'm going to slice it along here, holding down Alt and clicking those points. And I'm trying to be as clean with the lines as I possibly can. And it's going to do this this weird thing where it's going to basically split this thing off. And I know from doing this a few times, I need to get this split off this way because I'm basically looking, let me do it right here. I'll break it up here like this. I need to mirror this thing across. And so if I do mirror and weld, this is going to give me this piece like this. That works. And I'm getting closer to what I want for that shape. The only problem is I don't want this and this together whenever I smooth. So you can see they're like their own little islands. If I click on that, there is a tool within the polygroups, which is auto groups, and it looks at whatever is visible. If you have your own little islands like this, it'll make new polygroups for you. And I've used that enough to where I made a hotkey for myself. I just you know, the regular hotkey for adding a polygroup is just Control W, and that makes a polygroup for whatever is visible. I made a hotkey for this that's Control Shift W, and so I can use this auto groups because I'm again using it quite a bit. Now if I bring everything back, I really need to get this piece, this purple and this blue, I need to get that to be one piece again. So that's pretty easy. I just hold on Control Shift, click on this and this together, do the inverse of that, hit Control W, and now I've got that section backing in. So this color, if you don't like the color of a polygroup, you can isolate that and hit Control W and just keep cycling through possible color combinations. The colors don't actually matter other than trying to keep you informed as to what needs to be a group all by itself. So I'm going to show this piece. I think I'm going to do this, this, and this like that, and get those all together. And then I'll mask that, bring everything back, and hit the inverse of that, because I want to have all these things together whenever I do the polish by feature, and have all these surfaces kind of pull on each other. So again, that's going to tear up this edge a little bit, so I can hold down Control, click on that mask, and then just do a polish by feature once on that. Get rid of that. So here you can see I've got this new shape kind of starting to emerge for this thing. And I do see there's a little bit of wobble in my surface here. I want this line to be kind of a little bit nicer, so I'm going to put it on the move brush, and I'll just push this this thing up a little bit like that. And I will also drag this out. I want something, some shape more like that. And I'll do a polish by feature kind of slightly on the entire model. You can see it kind of got rid of that line in the middle there. And now I can do a polish by feature, maybe just a little bit more, and then mirror and weld. And things are starting to look a lot better for me. So I know this is a lot of work for this stage, but once you learn these tools, this will go by pretty darn quick. So I think that's going to be enough for this section for taking a shape and getting introduced to the polish by feature. And the next one, we're going to take a look at how we can start extruding some surfaces out from this shape that we have.